One of the main differences in how Islam and Christianity view Jesus pertains to his fate. The New Testament claims Jesus died for our sins, whereas the Quran states that Jesus did not die, but that God made it appear so, then took him to heaven. The Quran does not provide further details on how this occurred. This has led Muslim scholars to speculate over the centuries, resulting in two major views. One view is that God allowed Jesus to be crucified, then made it appear he had died. Mistaken for dead, Jesus was removed from the cross and buried. While in his grave, God healed Jesus and took him to heaven. The second popular view is that God made someone look like Jesus, and this look-alike was arrested and crucified while Jesus was taken to heaven. Muslim scholars have speculated that the person made to look like Jesus may have been Judas for betraying Jesus, or Simon of Cyrene who had carried Jesus' cross, or perhaps someone else. Muslims will occasionally appeal to the Gospel of Barnabas in support. This gospel states that when soldiers came to arrest Jesus, God changed Judas's physical appearance so that he looked like Jesus. When the soldiers saw Judas, they arrested him, despite his very strong protest that they had gotten the wrong man. While leading Muslim apologists such as Ahmed Deedat and Zakir Naik have hesitated to endorse the Gospel of Barnabas, they are likewise hesitant to deny its authenticity. Instead, they encourage Muslims to use the New Testament Gospels when talking with Christians and interpret them, or I should say rather misinterpret them, in such a manner to have the Gospels support Islamic theology. But there are many reasons why the authenticity of the Gospel of Barnabas should be rejected, even by Muslims. Let's look at two major reasons. First, the Gospel of Barnabas clearly contradicts the Quran. The Quran says there are 7 heavens, but the Gospel of Barnabas says there are 9. The Quran says Mary experienced great pain while giving birth to Jesus, but the Gospel of Barnabas says Mary experienced no pain while giving birth to Jesus. The Quran refers to Jesus as Messiah on 9 occasions, but the Gospel of Barnabas never refers to Jesus as Messiah. In fact, it even denies that he is on 2 occasions. Now, it's noteworthy that the Gospel of Barnabas refers to Jesus as Christ on 4 occasions. And this is quite humorous since the word Christ is the Greek translation for the Hebrew word Mashiach, or Messiah. So the Gospel of Barnabas twice states that Jesus is not the Messiah while referring to him as Christ, Messiah, on 4 occasions. Of course, this is not a mistake the real Barnabas of first century Palestine would have made. The second major reason why the authenticity of the Gospel of Barnabas should be rejected is the presence of several anachronisms that suggest a date of composition no earlier than the 14th century. One anachronism pertains to the year of Jubilee. Leviticus 25:11 in the Bible states that the year of Jubilee occurred every 50 years. But around the year 1300, Pope Boniface VIII decreed that from that time on, the year of Jubilee would be held every 100 years. However, in 1343, Pope Clement VI returned the year of Jubilee to once every 50 years. Therefore, it's of interest that the Gospel of Barnabas states that the year of Jubilee is every 100 years. This suggests that the Gospel of Barnabas was probably written sometime between the years 1300 and 1343. And of course, it's also possible that it was written even later because the forger didn't get Pope Clement's memo. 2 side notes are in order. First, there is evidence that a Gospel of Barnabas existed earlier than the 14th century. Written around the middle of the 6th century, the 5th section of the Gelasian Decree mentions a Gospel of Barnabas and states that it's an apocryphal book, falsely attributed to Barnabas. In the 7th century, a document called the List of 60 Books likewise mentions a Gospel of Barnabas as an apocryphal book. However, the anachronisms in the Gospel of Barnabas we have in our possession, of which I've mentioned only one, suggest this was a different text than the earlier mentioned one. Second, some Muslims have argued that the early church father Irenaeus quoted extensively from the Gospel of Barnabas. However, this claim is based on a single manuscript that has been dated to approximately 1400 years after Irenaeus wrote. This manuscript introduces the Gospel of Barnabas with the claim that Irenaeus quoted extensively from the Gospel of Barnabas in an otherwise unknown work against the Apostle Paul. Now, this is without doubt a false claim, since in his extant writings, Irenaeus frequently refers to Paul's authority in a positive manner. He even refers to Paul and Peter as the two most glorious apostles. He also said those who do not recognize Paul as an apostle must also reject the writings of Luke, who was a disciple of the apostles and who recognized Paul as an apostle. Then Irenaeus says, whoever rejects Luke rejects the gospel message. Accordingly, an anti-Pauline work by Irenaeus should be rejected, since it's based on a single medieval report written 1400 years after Irenaeus, is otherwise never mentioned in any ancient or medieval literature, has never since been seen, and clearly contradicts what Irenaeus actually said about Paul in his extant writings. Now, the equivalent would be a claim that a lost work of Sahih al-Bukhari had been discovered by a now-deceased imam who had showed it to no one, but he claimed that Bukhari frequently quoted a letter from Muhammad stating he had enlisted the services of a lettered relative who secretly composed the Quran. That would be historical evidence of the poorest kind. No one would believe it, nor should they. And that's precisely the kind of evidence we have introducing the Gospel of Barnabas in the single manuscript written 1400 years later. In summary, that the Gospel contradicts the Quran should be reason enough for Muslims to reject it and regard it as a forgery. There is also little doubt that the Gospel of Barnabas in our possession is a medieval forgery that has no links to the Apostle Barnabas. It contains anachronisms suggesting it was written no earlier than the 14th century, and it makes a linguistic blunder the historical Barnabas certainly would not have made. Well, so much for the Gospel of Barnabas. In my next video, I'll describe some challenges that raise doubts pertaining to the Quran's view of Jesus' fate.